The screaming started at sunset. Lee Durant pressed her palm against the laboratory window and watched orange flames consume the eastern residential district. 3 months ago, she had walked those streets buying fresh bread from the corner bakery. Now the bakery was ash, and the people who ran it were either dead or fleeing toward the spaceport in a desperate stampede. The building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling tiles. Somewhere above, the orbital defense platforms were dying one by one as the unknown aliens systematically destroyed everything humanity had built on Verdant Ridge. The evacuation sirens had been wailing for 20 minutes. Every rational person on the colony was running toward the last transport ships. Lee ran deeper into the facility. Her keycard barely worked on the restricted lab entrance. The magnetic lock flickered twice before accepting her credentials. She stumbled through, lungs burning from smoke seeping through the ventilation system. Emergency lights painted everything in shades of red. The egg sat alone in its containment chamber. It was beautiful and terrifying. Nearly a meter tall, its shell shimmered with colors that seemed to shift in the firelight. Deep blues became violent purples, became burning golds. The research team had found it 3 weeks ago in an asteroid field near the system's edge. Nobody knew what species laid it. Nobody knew what would hatch from it. Nobody except Lee cared anymore. Dr. Ahmadi was dead. Dr. Wolf was dead. The others had fled when the first bombs fell. They had families, children, lives worth saving. Lee had nothing but questions and a burning need to know what lived inside that impossible shell. The egg moved. A hairline crack appeared along its equator. Then another. The temperature in the room climbed 5 degrees in seconds. Lee approached slowly, forgetting about the invasion, forgetting about death raining from the sky. All her training, all her years studying xenobiology on a dozen worlds had led to this moment. The shell split. What emerged was not cute or small or helpless like most newborns. It unfurled like liquid metal taking shape, all serpentine grace and alien geometry. 6 crystalline eyes opened in pairs down its elongated skull. Scales the color of molten iron covered its body. Wing membranes hung translucent between elegant bone structures. Small horns sprouted from its head like growing crystals. It looked at Lee. The moment stretched. The creature's 6 eyes focused on her with unmistakable intelligence. Its body radiated heat that should have been unbearable but somehow felt comforting. Lee reached out without thinking, and the newborn creature pressed its angular head into her palm. The ceiling exploded. Debris rained down as a support beam crashed through the laboratory roof. Alarms shrieked. The sprinkler system activated, turning the smoke into a choking fog. Lee stumbled backward, but the creature moved faster. It positioned itself between her and the falling wreckage, taking a concrete slab across its back that should have crushed it. The creature shook off the impact like it was nothing. Lee grabbed her emergency pack and scooped up her research tablet. The main exit was blocked. Fire consumed the western corridor. The creature made a sound somewhere between a growl and a purr, its attention fixed on the sealed emergency door to the east. "That's reinforced steel," Lee said, knowing the creature couldn't understand. "We can't get through." The creature approached the door. Heat shimmered around its body. Its mouth opened and something brighter than welding torches erupted from its throat. The steel glowed orange, then white, then simply melted. The creature had carved an exit in 15 seconds. Lee followed it into smoke and chaos. The colony streets were a nightmare of flames and running people. Shapes moved in the sky overhead, alien fighters strafing anything that moved. The creature stayed close to Lee, moving with surprising agility for something the size of a large dog. When debris blocked their path, it cleared it. When flames forced them to detour, it found safe routes with instincts Lee couldn't explain. They reached the spaceport plaza, just in time to see the last transport ship lift off. Lee stopped running. Her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the scorched pavement. Above, the transport climbed toward the stars. Below, the alien landing craft descended like falling meteors. She had gambled everything on saving an unknown creature instead of saving herself. The creature circled her once, then twice, then settled beside her with its body curved protectively around her smaller frame. Its scales felt warm against her back, its breathing synchronized with hers. When Lee looked into those 6 crystalline eyes, she saw something impossible. She saw concern. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have left you, should have run. Now we're both going to die here." The creature made that purring growl again. One wing membrane draped across her shoulders like a blanket. The ground shook as the first alien landing craft touched down 2 blocks away. Lee heard soldiers shouting in a language that sounded like grinding metal. The creature's eyes tracked the sounds. Its body temperature increased. Those massive jaws opened slightly, revealing teeth like daggers and that inner fire that could melt steel. Lee put her hand on its scaled neck. "Hey, look at me." The creature obeyed immediately. "We need to hide. Can you understand that? We need to hide and survive." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the creature stood and gently took Lee's jacket sleeve in its teeth. It pulled her toward a maintenance tunnel entrance half hidden by rubble. The symbol on the door indicated it led to the underground infrastructure network. Lee let herself be led into the darkness beneath the dying colony. The creature went first, its body providing light from the heat shimmer around its scales. Behind them, the alien soldiers spread through the streets claiming a world that no longer belonged to humanity. In the tunnels below, a human woman and an impossible creature curled together in the dark. Lee wrapped her arms around the newborn's neck and felt it relax into her embrace. Somewhere in the hours between fire and fear, between death and desperation, something fundamental had changed. She had witnessed a birth. And somehow, inexplicably, she had become a mother. Above them, the colony burned. But below, in the safety of darkness, 2 beings from different worlds shared warmth and found they were not alone. Hunger woke Lee on the 19th day. Her stomach cramped as she opened her eyes to the dim glow of the geothermal plant's emergency lighting. The creature she had started calling Blaze was already awake, watching her with those 6 crystalline eyes. In 3 weeks, it had grown from the size of a large dog to something closer to a wolf. Its scales had darkened to deep crimson, with veins of gold running through them like lava flows. Lee sat up slowly. Her body ached from sleeping on concrete floors and scavenging through ruins. The protein bars from her emergency pack had run out 4 days ago. Water was plentiful thanks to the plant's filtration system, but water alone wouldn't keep her alive much longer. Blaze made a low chirping sound and nudged something toward her with its snout. A dead rabbit still warm. Lee stared at the animal, her scientist brain cataloging it as one of the native species the colonists had introduced for the ecosystem. Her survival brain just saw food. Blaze had been bringing her small animals for the past week, but this was the first time she had been desperate enough to actually consider eating one. "You've been hunting for me," she said quietly. Blaze's scales shifted colors, patterns flowing across its body like northern lights. Lee had started to recognize them as communication. This pattern meant satisfaction, accomplishment. The creature was proud of its catch. Lee built a small fire using debris and her emergency lighter. As she cooked the rabbit, Blaze settled nearby with its body curved around her workspace. The creature's presence had become as natural as breathing. It followed her everywhere, anticipated her needs, protected her from the collapse zones and unstable structures that filled the ruined colony. 3 days ago, an alien patrol had entered their section of the underground tunnels. Lee had frozen at the sound of their guttural voices echoing through the maintenance corridors. Blaze had pushed her behind a broken water tank with surprising gentleness, then positioned itself between her and the approaching soldiers. When the patrol rounded the corner, they found a creature that looked like it had crawled out of their worst nightmares. The fight lasted less than a minute. Lee had huddled behind the tank, hands pressed over her ears trying not to hear the screams. Blaze moved like liquid violence, all speed and heat and fury. When silence returned, 4 alien soldiers lay dead and Blaze stood panting, steam rising from its scales. The creature had 3 burns across its flank, where their weapons had hit it. Lee had spent the next 6 hours treating those wounds with supplies scavenged from a medical clinic. She had talked to Blaze the entire time, her voice soft and steady. She told it about her daughter, about the illness that had taken her, about the empty years that followed. She told it about coming to Verdant Ridge hopping to find purpose in studying alien life. Blaze had listened to every word. Its scales pulsed with gentle blues and greens. When Lee finally broke down crying, the creature rested its massive head in her lap and stayed perfectly still until her tears stopped. Now, finishing her meal, Lee looked at Blaze and saw those wounds had almost completely healed. The creature's biology was extraordinary. Regeneration rates that should have taken weeks happened in days. Its intelligence exceeded anything in the xenobiology databases. Most remarkable was its emotional capacity. Blaze understood grief, understood comfort, understood protection. "We can't stay here much longer," Lee said. She pulled out her salvaged tablet and checked the maps she had downloaded before the network died. "The aliens are expanding their search patterns. They'll find this plant eventually." Blaze's scales shifted to attentive orange. "There's an old mining complex in the northern mountains, 300 kilometers. The terrain is rough, but if anyone else survived, that's where they'd go. It's defensible, remote." Lee looked at the creature. "Can you make that journey?" Blaze stood and walked to the plant entrance. It looked back at her expectantly. Lee packed what little she had: a change of clothes, her research notes, basic medical supplies, the tablet. Everything fit in a small backpack. 23 years of education and experience reduced to what she could carry on her back. They left at dusk when the ash storms reduced visibility. The colony ruins stretched for kilometers in every direction. Buildings stood like broken teeth against the darkening sky. Blaze moved through the devastation with eerie grace, picking paths through the rubble that kept them hidden from aerial patrols. When they had to cross exposed areas, the creature waited for the right moment and sprinted with Lee clinging to its back. On the second night, they sheltered in what had been a school. Lee found children's drawings still pinned to a bulletin board, crude crayon images of families and houses and bright suns. She carefully took one down and folded it into her pocket, evidence that this place had been alive once, that people had built lives here. Blaze found her sitting on the floor staring at the drawings. The creature settled beside her and made a sound she had never heard before. It was almost musical, like wind chimes made of crystal. Its scales glowed soft gold in the darkness. When Lee leaned against its warm flank, Blaze wrapped one wing around her shoulders. "I don't know what you are," Lee whispered. "I don't know where you came from or why you're helping me, but I'm grateful. You've saved my life a dozen times. You've kept me sane. You've given me something to care about again." Blaze's response was a gentle rumble deep in its chest. They slept there in the ruined school, human and alien curled together for warmth and comfort. Outside, the ash storms howled. Above, the stars shone cold and distant. But inside that small shelter, 2 beings from different worlds had found something neither expected. They had found family. When dawn broke gray and grim, they continued north. The mountains rose in the distance like promises. Blaze carried Lee for hours, never tiring, never complaining. It stopped to hunt when she needed food. It found clean water in streams hidden beneath rubble. It protected her from the dangers of a world tearing itself apart. And Lee, in turn, gave Blaze something its species might have been searching for across the stars. She gave it love. The child's scream cut through the mountain wind like broken glass. Lee's head snapped up from where she crouched beside a stream. Blaze reacted faster, its massive body already moving toward the sound before Lee could even stand. The creature had grown again during their 5-day journey north. Now it was easily the size of a horse, its wingspan broad enough to create shadows that covered entire clearings. They had reached the foothills yesterday. The mining complex was close, maybe another day's travel. But right now, somewhere in the rocky terrain ahead, a child was screaming. Lee ran after Blaze, her boots slipping on loose scree. The creature bounded up the steep slope with impossible agility. She lost sight of it around a boulder formation, then heard voices. Adult voices shouting. The metallic click of weapons being armed. She rounded the rocks and stopped dead. 12 humans stood in defensive positions around the mouth of a cave. They held an assortment of mining tools, improvised weapons, and exactly 2 actual rifles. All of those weapons were pointed at Blaze. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, stood frozen between the humans and the creature. She had wandered too far from the group, and now neither side knew what to do. Blaze stood perfectly still, head lowered, body language submissive. Its scales showed pale blue patterns, calm, non-threatening. The creature was trying not to scare the child. "Nobody move," said a man with gray hair and hard eyes. He held one of the rifles steady on Blaze's head. "Sophie, walk toward me slowly." "It's beautiful," the child whispered, staring at Blaze with wonder instead of fear. "Sophie, now." Lee stepped into view, hands raised. "Please don't shoot, that creature is with me." Every weapon immediately shifted to point at her instead. The gray-haired man's eyes narrowed. "Dr. Durant, from the Xenobiology Division." "You know me." "Robert Gray, I ran colony security." He kept his rifle trained on her center mass. "That thing killed 4 of the occupation soldiers in the tunnel systems. We found the bodies. It was protecting me. They would have killed us both. It's a predator, an alien predator, and you're traveling with it voluntarily." "She raised it," said an older woman stepping forward. "Look at them. Look at how it's behaving." Blaze hadn't moved. The child, Sophie, took a tentative step toward the creature. Her mother made a sound of protest, but Robert held up his hand. They all watched as Sophie approached Blaze with the fearless curiosity only children possess. She reached out and touched one of the crystalline horns growing from Blaze's head. The creature rumbled softly, a sound like distant thunder. Its scales shifted to warm gold. Sophie giggled and patted its snout. Blaze responded by gently nuzzling the child's hand. "It's friendly," Sophie announced. "Can we keep it?" Despite everything, several people laughed. The tension broke like a snapped wire. Robert lowered his rifle but didn't put it away. "Dr. Durant, you need to explain what exactly is going on here." Lee told them everything. The hatching, the bonding, the survival, the journey north. She showed them her research notes documenting Blaze's growth and behavior. She demonstrated the creature's intelligence by giving it complex instructions that it followed perfectly. Robert listened to it all with the expression of a man who had seen too much strangeness to be truly surprised anymore. "We're barely surviving here," he said finally. 14 people, including 4 children. No way to call for help. The aliens patrol these mountains twice a week. We've lost 3 people to their sweeps. Blaze can help with that." "Blaze, you named it." She needed a name. "It's a giant fire-breathing alien monster." "She's my family." Those words hung in the cold mountain air. Robert studied Lee's face, then looked at Blaze, who had settled down to let Sophie and 2 other children explore its wings. The creature bore their attention with remarkable patience, scales glowing with gentle colors. "The aliens have been searching for something," Robert said quietly. "Every patrol they scan with specialized equipment. I think they're looking for that creature. They probably detected its heat signature when it hatched, a biological anomaly. If we let you stay, We're putting everyone at risk. If you turn us away, you're sending us to die. Lee met his eyes, and you're giving up the only weapon capable of fighting back. A younger man spoke up. She has a point, Robert. We can't defend this position with mining tools and 2 rifles, but that thing, it could change everything. Robert was quiet for a long time. He watched Blaze interact with the children, saw how carefully the creature moved to avoid hurting them. Finally, he sighed. We'll take a vote. Democratic. Everyone gets a say, including the kids. The vote was 9-5 in favor of letting them stay. Lee and Blaze were given space in a side chamber of the cave system. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. The survivors had managed to rig basic lighting and heating using salvaged mining equipment. They had stockpiled food and water. They had created a small community in the ruins of their world. That night, Robert found Lee sitting with Blaze near the cave entrance. The creature had its wing draped over her shoulders against the cold. The little one, Sophie, Robert said. She lost her parents in the initial attack. We've all been looking after her, but she's been quiet, withdrawn. Today was the first time I've seen her smile in weeks. Lee stroked Blaze's scaled neck. She recognizes kindness when she sees it. Your creature, where did it come from? I don't know. The egg was found in deep space. No ship, no distress beacon, just floating in an asteroid field like it had been there for years, maybe centuries. And it bonded with you just like that. I was the first thing it saw when it hatched. Maybe that matters to its species. Maybe they're programmed to bond with whoever shows them kindness first. Lee smiled. Or maybe she just knew I needed her as much as she needed me. Robert nodded slowly. The aliens are coming back in 3 days. Big patrol this time. They're planning something. Then we have 3 days to prepare. Can that creature fight? Lee looked at Blaze, remembering the tunnel, the speed, the power, the absolute devastation the creature had unleashed to protect her. Yes, she said, Blaze can fight, but she's so much more than a weapon. What is she then? Lee thought about the question, about everything Blaze had done, the protection, the companionship, the gentle way it handled Sophie, the warmth it provided on cold nights, the hope it represented. She's proof, Lee said finally, that love exists beyond humanity. The alien commander arrived with 50 soldiers and enough firepower to level a city block. Lee watched them through the scope of Robert's rifle from a concealed position in the rocks above the cave entrance. Heavy armored vehicles, energy weapons, aerial drones circling like mechanical vultures. This wasn't a patrol. This was an execution force. They know we're here, Robert whispered beside her. Question is, do they know about Blaze? As if answering, the commander's voice boomed across the valley through translation speakers. The words came out harsh and grinding. Humans of the mountain refuge, surrender now. Compliance will be rewarded with quick death. Resistance will be met with suffering. Generous of them, Robert muttered. Below, Blaze waited in a prepared position behind a false rock wall. The creature had grown even larger in the past weeks. Now it was massive as a small ship, barely able to fit in the largest cave chamber. Its intelligence had grown too. When Lee had explained the defensive plan using rocks and drawings in the dirt, Blaze had understood immediately. The survivors had 3 children to protect. They had voted unanimously to fight rather than surrender. If they were going to die, they would die on their feet. The alien commander waited 30 seconds for a response that never came. Then he gave the order to attack. The first wave hit the outer defenses hard. Explosives shattered the rockfall barriers. Energy weapons scorched the mountainside. The 2 human rifles answered back, taking down 3 soldiers before they had to relocate. The aliens pushed forward with disciplined aggression. Then Blaze erupted from the mountainside like a force of nature. The creature burst through the false wall in an explosion of stone and fury. Its roar shook the valley. Fire poured from its jaws, turning the lead assault vehicle into molten slag. Soldiers scattered as Blaze crashed into their formation with devastating force. Lee had seen Blaze fight in the tunnels. That had been quick and brutal. This was war. Blaze moved like intelligent lightning. It used its size for impact, its fire for area denial, its speed to avoid concentrated fire. Wing beats created whirlwinds that knocked soldiers off their feet. Its tail swept like a battering ram. Claws that could be gentle with children now tore through armor plating. The aliens rallied. They brought anti-armor weapons to bear. Explosive rounds detonated against Blaze's scales. The creature roared in pain but pressed the attack. Lee watched in horror as one of Blaze's wings took a direct hit, tearing a hole through the membrane. "She's hurt," Lee said, starting to move. Robert grabbed her arm. "Stay in position. She's doing what she was born to do. If you go down there now, she'll stop fighting to protect you and they'll kill you both." Lee knew he was right. She forced herself to stay hidden, to watch, to trust that Blaze could handle this. But every wound the creature took felt like a knife in her own chest. The battle turned when the alien commander deployed his aerial units. 3 attack drones rose above the battlefield, targeting Blaze from angles the ground troops couldn't reach. The creature looked up at them, and Lee saw something in those 6 crystalline eyes. Calculation. Blaze's wings, damaged as they were, still worked. The creature launched itself into the air with powerful leg muscles and desperate wing beats. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't controlled, but it got high enough to engage the drones at their own altitude. The aerial combat lasted 40 seconds. Blaze destroyed all 3 drones through a combination of fire, claws, and sheer momentum. The creature used one drone as a shield against another's weapons, then crashed through the third with its entire body mass. Then Blaze fell. The wounded wing couldn't support controlled flight. The creature plummeted 50 meters and hit the ground in an impact that cracked stone. Lee screamed its name. Blaze struggled to rise, legs shaking, blood streaming from multiple wounds. The alien commander saw his opportunity. He charged forward with his elite guards, weapons firing in concentrated volleys. They were going to finish Blaze while the creature was down. Lee didn't think, she just moved. She vaulted from her position and sprinted down the mountainside, Robert's shouts lost behind her. She reached Blaze just as the commander leveled his weapon at the creature's head. Lee threw herself across Blaze's neck, spreading her arms as if her small human body could shield something so massive. "No," she screamed. The commander hesitated. In that moment of confusion, Blaze moved. The creature surged upward despite its wounds, positioned itself between Lee and the soldiers. Its body temperature spiked. Heat radiated from its scales like a furnace. Then something changed in Blaze's eyes. The intelligence there became something more, something ancient and terrible and protective beyond all reason. The fire that erupted from Blaze's jaws wasn't the controlled weapon from before. This was primal fury made manifest. The commander's shields failed. His armor melted. He died before he could scream. The elite guards broke and ran. Behind them, the regular soldiers saw their commander fall and lost all cohesion. The attack collapsed into a rout. Within minutes, the surviving aliens were fleeing down the mountain in complete disorder. Blaze stood in the center of the battlefield, swaying on damaged legs. Steam rose from its scales. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds. The creature's eyes found Lee, and all that fury drained away, replaced by something gentle. Blaze collapsed. Lee caught the creature's massive head as it fell, cradling it in her lap. The other survivors emerged from hiding, staring in shock at the devastation. 50 alien soldiers reduced to a routed mob by one creature defending its family. "Medical supplies," Lee shouted. "Now." Sophie appeared at her side, the little girl's eyes wide with tears. "Is Blaze going to be okay?" Lee looked at the wounds. The burns, the torn wing, the exhaustion. She wanted to lie to comfort the child, but instead she did something human. She chose hope over certainty. "She's going to be fine," Lee said, stroking Blaze's scaled head. "She's strong, she just needs rest." Blaze's eyes fluttered. Its scales pulsed with faint color. The creature made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a purr. "That's right," Lee whispered. "You did so well, you saved us all. Now let me take care of you." The survivors worked through the night treating Blaze's wounds. They used everything they had, gave everything they could. And when dawn broke over the mountain, Blaze still breathed. Lee never left the creature's side. 2 months of peace felt like a lifetime after 2 months of war. Lee sat in the mouth of the cave watching dawn paint the mountains gold. Behind her, she heard the sounds of the community waking up. Voices, laughter, the clatter of cooking pots. 40 people now called this place home. More survivors had found their way here, drawn by rumors of a safe haven guarded by something impossible. Blaze slept in the main chamber, her body curled protectively around the children's sleeping area. The creature had become their guardian, their protector, their strange mascot. The torn wing had healed, though it bore scars. The burns had faded. Blaze was stronger now than before the battle. But Lee knew their peace couldn't last forever. Robert climbed up to join her, carrying 2 cups of the terrible synthetic coffee they had salvaged from a supply depot. "We got the communications array working last night," he said, handing her a cup. "Picked up encrypted military chatter." "Federation." "Yes, there's a fleet assembling 3 systems away. They're planning a counteroffensive. Verdant Ridge is on the liberation list." Robert paused. 6 months out. 6 months, an eternity when survival was measured in days. Lee sipped the awful coffee and watched the sunrise. "We can make it 6 months. Maybe, if the aliens don't send another assault force." As if summoned by those words, the alert system Robert had rigged began wailing. A runner sprinted up from the watch post below, breathless and pale. "Incoming," the young man gasped. "Different aliens this time. Smaller force but specialized equipment. They're tracking something." Lee's blood went cold. "Tracking Blaze." "That would be my guess," Robert said grimly. "Get everyone into the deep caves. I'll organize a defense." Lee ran back inside. Blaze was already awake, sensing the change in atmosphere. The creature's scales showed alert orange patterns. Sophie clung to one of its legs, frightened by the sirens. "It's okay, sweetheart," Lee said gently. "Take the other children deeper inside. Blaze needs to go help the adults." "Will she be safe?" Lee looked at the massive creature who had fought an army to protect them. "I'll make sure she is." The hunter team arrived an hour later. 20 soldiers in specialized armor, moving with the precision of trained killers. They didn't announce themselves, didn't offer terms. They simply began deploying equipment designed to track and kill one specific target. Sonic emitters, thermal lances, neural disruptors, every piece of technology calibrated for hunting megafauna. Blaze met them in the valley below the caves. The fight was nothing like the battle 2 months ago. These soldiers knew what they were facing. Their weapons were designed specifically to counter Blaze's advantages. When the creature unleashed fire, they had heat shields. When it attacked with speed, they had prediction algorithms. Lee watched from above as Blaze took hit after hit. Sonic weapons disrupted its balance. Neural disruptors caused its movements to become erratic. A thermal lance burned through its scales, drawing a roar of pain that echoed across the mountains. The creature was losing. Robert grabbed Lee's shoulder. "We need to help." "How? Our weapons are useless against their armor." "Maybe, but we can create a distraction." Robert gathered everyone who could hold a weapon. They opened fire from the caves, not to kill but to divert attention. The hunters split their focus, some maintaining pressure on Blaze while others turned to deal with the humans. It was enough. Blaze, given a moment to recover, launched a desperate counterattack. The creature fought with savage determination, accepting wounds to deliver killing blows. 3 hunters fell, then 5, then 8. But Blaze was dying too. Lee could see it in the way the creature moved. The poison from the neural disruptors was spreading through its system. Blaze's scales had turned dull gray. Its fire burned weak and sporadic. The creature collapsed. The remaining hunters moved in for the kill. Lee didn't remember deciding to run. She just found herself sprinting down the mountainside, screaming Blaze's name. She reached the creature's side just as a hunter raised a thermal lance. Lee spread her arms across Blaze's neck. "Stop, please." The hunter hesitated. The moment stretched. Then he adjusted his aim and fired. The lance burned through Lee's shoulder instead of Blaze's throat. Pain exploded through her body. She fell, clutching the wound, blood pouring between her fingers. Through failing vision, she saw Blaze's 6 eyes snap open, saw the creature register that Lee was hurt. What happened next burned itself into survivor testimony for years to come. Blaze rose despite the poison, despite the wounds, despite every logical reason it should have been dead. The creature's body ignited with heat so intense it turned sand to glass. Its roar shattered equipment and burst eardrums. The remaining hunters died in seconds. Then Blaze collapsed beside Lee, both of them bleeding and broken on scorched earth. The creature's massive head rested near her uninjured side. One crystalline eye focused on her face. "Hey," Lee whispered through the pain. "We're a mess, aren't we?" Blaze made a sound like wind through crystals. Its scales pulsed with faint colors, blue for sadness, gold for love. Robert reached them with medical supplies and 2 other survivors. They worked frantically on both patients. Lee drifted in and out of consciousness. She heard Robert shouting instructions, heard Sophie crying, heard the sound of her own blood dripping onto stone. Then she heard Blaze's breathing slow. "No," Lee forced herself to focus. "Robert, help Blaze first. You're the one who's going to die if we don't stop this bleeding. Save her first." Robert looked at Lee's face and saw something that made him understand. He shifted his attention to Blaze, used their limited medical supplies on alien biology he barely understood. Lee talked him through it, her voice weak but steady, explaining which areas were vital, where to apply pressure, how to counteract the poison using Blaze's own regenerative blood cells. Hours blurred together. Pain became a distant thing. Lee felt herself slipping away but forced herself to stay conscious, to keep talking, to keep guiding Robert's hands. Finally, Blaze's breathing stabilized. "She's going to make it," Robert said, exhausted. "Good," Lee whispered. Then she let herself fall into darkness. She woke 3 days later to find Blaze's massive head resting gently on the cave floor beside her makeshift bed. The creature had refused to leave her side, had barely eaten, had just waited with crystalline eyes fixed on Lee's face. When those eyes saw her wake, they blazed with colors so bright and joyful that Lee started crying. "Hey, beautiful," she said, reaching out to touch scarred scales. "Miss me?" Blaze made that crystal wind sound and carefully, so carefully, pressed its head against her hand. They had both survived. Somehow, impossibly, they had both survived. And 6 months suddenly didn't seem so long to wait. The stars came home on a Tuesday morning. Lee stood outside the cave watching the Federation fleet materialize in orbit like falling stars in reverse. 6 months of survival had come down to this moment. 40 humans huddled in mountains waiting to learn if they were the last of their kind or just the first to be rescued. Blaze settled beside her, scales gleaming in the early light. The creature was enormous now, easily the size of a small spacecraft. Its presence had become as natural to Lee as her own heartbeat. 6 crystalline eyes watched the sky with the same hope she felt. Robert's salvaged communicator crackled to life. "Unknown survivors, this is Federation Battleship Resolute. Transmit your coordinates for evacuation. Robert looked at Lee. She nodded. He spoke into the device. Resolute, this is Robert Gray, former colony security. We have 40 survivors at the northern mining complex. Coordinates transmitting now. A pause. Confirmed, dispatching dropship. Stand by for extraction. 20 minutes later, the dropships descended through morning clouds like mechanical angels. Lee watched the survivors gather their meager belongings. 6 months of living in caves reduced to what they could carry. Sophie ran to Lee and grabbed her hand. Will Blaze come with us? I don't know, sweetheart. The dropships landed in the valley. Marines emerged in full armor, weapons ready, securing the perimeter. They moved with the practiced efficiency of professional soldiers. Their leader approached the cave entrance, helmet retracting to reveal a woman's face weathered by years of command. I'm Captain Rodriguez. We're here to evacuate civilians and assess the area for. She stopped talking when Blaze emerged from the cave entrance. Every Marine weapon immediately trained on the massive creature. Hold fire, Lee shouted, stepping between Blaze and the soldiers. She's with us. Rodriguez stared. Dr. Durant, Dr. Lee Durant from the Xenobiology Division. Yes, and this is Blaze. She's been protecting us for 6 months. That's an unknown hostile alien species. She's my family. The words hung in the mountain air. Rodriguez looked at Lee's scarred shoulder, still healing from the thermal lance wound. She looked at the 40 survivors emerging from the caves, healthy and alive against all odds. She looked at Blaze, who stood perfectly still despite having 24 weapons aimed at its head. I need to consult with command, Rodriguez said finally. The debate took hours. Lee refused to evacuate without Blaze. The survivors backed her up, testifying about how the creature had protected them, fought for them, bled for them. Sophie told anyone who would listen about how Blaze kept her warm on cold nights and let her sleep against its scales. Finally, Admiral Park arrived via shuttle to see the situation personally. The Admiral was a small woman with iron in her spine and calculation in her eyes. She studied Blaze from a safe distance while Lee explained everything. The hatching, the bonding, the battles, the intelligence and emotional capacity the creature had demonstrated. It's killed Federation enemies, Park observed. She killed aliens who were trying to murder humans, Lee corrected. There's a difference. Is there, from a military perspective, you've trained a biological weapon. I've raised a daughter. Park's expression shifted slightly. I read your file, Dr. Durant. I know about your loss. I understand the need to fill that void, but this creature is dangerous. So are humans. We're the most dangerous species in known space, and we still deserve compassion. Can you control it? Lee looked at Blaze. The creature watched her with those 6 crystalline eyes, scales pulsing with gentle colors. I don't control Blaze. We're partners. She chooses to stay with me just like I choose to stay with her. Demonstrate. Lee spent the next hour showing Blaze's intelligence. The creature followed complex instructions, solved problems, showed remarkable emotional understanding. When Admiral Park stood too close, Blaze didn't threaten. Instead, the creature lowered its head and gently touched the Admiral's hand with its snout. Park jerked back in surprise. It's warm. She's always warm, Sophie said, appearing beside the Admiral. That's how we know she loves us. Something in Park's expression softened. She looked at the child, at Lee, at the massive creature who could have killed everyone here but chose gentleness instead. I'm making an unprecedented decision, Park said. The creature is permitted to evacuate with the human survivors. Dr. Durant is designated as its guardian and handler. Any aggressive behavior and we will terminate it immediately. Understood, Lee said, relief flooding through her. They loaded onto the dropship together. Blaze barely fit even in the heavy cargo bay. The creature curled its body into the smallest configuration possible, trying not to take up too much space. Sophie and the other children gathered around it. Blaze's scales showed gentle gold and blue patterns. As the dropship lifted off, Lee looked out at the mountains where they had survived the impossible. 6 months ago, she had been running through fire with a newborn alien in her arms. Now she was leaving with a fully grown creature who had become the most important being in her life. The fleet welcomed them aboard the flagship with mixed reactions. Some saw Blaze as a threat, others saw a miracle. Lee didn't care what they thought. She had Blaze, she had survived. They had both survived. Admiral Park called Lee to her office 3 days later. "We've been analyzing the egg fragments from your research notes," Park said. "Running genetic comparisons. Dr. Durant, that creature didn't evolve naturally. It was engineered." "For what purpose?" "Companionship, protection, partnership. Its DNA contains markers suggesting it was designed to bond with other sentient species. There's a whole language coded into its genetics that we're just beginning to translate." Lee thought about the way Blaze had bonded with her instantly. The protective instincts, the emotional intelligence. Its species was meant to be with other beings. "There may be more eggs out there, scattered across the galaxy during some ancient conflict." Park leaned forward. "I want to fund an expedition, find them, study them, learn what civilization created them and why." "What about Blaze?" "She goes with you, as primary researcher and as her guardian." Park smiled slightly. "Congratulations, Dr. Durant. You've just been promoted to head of interspecies relations." Lee returned to her quarters where Blaze waited. The creature's scales brightened when it saw her. Lee sat beside the massive alien and rested her head against its warm flank. "They want us to find others like you," she said softly. "Travel the galaxy looking for more eggs, more of your species." Blaze rumbled, a sound of curiosity and interest. "Would you like that, finding others like you?" The creature's response was a pattern of colors across its scales. Complex emotions Lee had learned to read. "Yes," it said, "but not alone, together." "Together," Lee agreed. She had come to Verdant Ridge searching for purpose in studying alien life. She had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found love that transcended species, bonds that defied logic, hope that survived fire and death and war. The dragon had been born in flames during humanity's darkest hour. But Lee Durant had raised it with love during their brightest days. And together, they would discover what miracles still waited among the stars.